Tonight on Reporting Scotland.
Yes, 67, no, 59. There were no abstentions. The motion is therefore agreed.
An 11th-hour deal with the Greens helps the Scottish Government's budget pass its first parliamentary hurdle. We'll be speaking live to the Finance Secretary. Also on the programme, the UK Government publishes its strategy for Brexit. The SNP accuses ministers of being disrespectful to Parliament. The hope that a big expansion of life science business will deliver rewards for doctors and patients. And Scotland's rugby coach Vern Cotter admits his players are nervous as they prepare for their Six Nations opener. Good evening. MSPs have tonight voted to support the Scottish Government's tax and spending budget package. The endorsement by 67 votes to 59 followed a deal between the Scottish ministers and the Greens. That involved extra money for local councils and a slightly bigger tax bill for higher earners. This from our political editor, Brian Taylor.
And so it's a budget bargain with the Greens. But is it a deal to prompt green shoots of recovery in the economy?
They're lovely and red inside and taste beautiful.
This Glasgow merchant is already fretting about business prospects post-Brexit.
Well, I think it's an unknown. We just don't know. It's just unnerving. We won't know until we actually get there.
From the Scottish Government, he wants stability and value for money. The Finance Secretary agrees. Derek Mackay also announced extra cash for police services, but the wider deal to rescue his budget is with the Greens. Some, like Labour's Neil Findlay, are less than impressed.
Catch the sellout Greens.
The Greens fought hard for a bigger tax take from higher earners, but they defend the deal.
And if you compare that to the track record of those who just throw their toys out the pram and just want to posture about how much they hate the current government, I think that's a completely futile way of engaging with the budget debate, and a government in minority ought to be pushed beyond its comfort zone.
The deal involves an extra £160 million for local government. Councils had complained of cuts, but until now, ministers had said local services were protected, for example through direct funding of schools. On tax, at the moment, you start paying the higher 40p rate of income tax when you're earning more than £43,000 per year. From April, Scottish ministers had wanted to increase that in line with inflation to £43,430. But today's deal means that threshold will be frozen, increasing the tax take still further. So the 40p rate kicks in for Scotland at £43,000. But elsewhere in the UK, that threshold will rise to £45,000. That means a higher rate taxpayer in Scotland will now pay up to £400 more each year than in England. For the Tories, Murdo Fraser said hard-working families would regret the deal.
What a pity, what a tragedy for Scotland that he chose to throw in his lot with the lentil-munching, sandal-wearing watermelons on that side of the chamber.
But Derek Mackay put the agreement in context.
Scottish taxpayers will continue to benefit from significant investment in our public services, above-inflation investment in the NHS, free prescriptions, free personal care, free higher education.
Labour condemned the SNP.
The nationalists who claim to be stronger for Scotland now want to weaken our public services and rip the heart out of our communities.
Today is a big missed opportunity. It's a missed opportunity to have a budget that will turn this country into a more liberal and a more economically strong country.
And more. There's an extra £35 million to help business via Scottish Enterprise. And back on the shop floor in Glasgow?
Always optimistic. Always optimistic.
And we can cross to the lobby of the Scottish Parliament now to speak to the Finance Secretary, Derek Mackay. Good evening, Mr Mackay. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And congratulations, you've got your budget through. Are you feeling relieved?
Well, I suppose I am. I've got it approved for tonight's stage, but I've actually got a deal. It'll ensure the budget passes at every stage, and I'm delighted with that. I do believe it's a good budget for Scotland.
As a result of this budget, though, Scotland is now going to be the highest taxed part of the UK. How is that going to... It's not.
No, it's not. 99% of taxpayers won't be paying any more tax. And,
any more than they are at the moment. They'll be paying more than they would be if they lived in England.
But, you know, the top 10% of earners we're speaking about here in the higher rate threshold, and what I'm proposing to do is to have a cash freeze on the higher rate threshold, not hike the tax rates. You know, some parties, like the Labour Party, wanted me to do that. I've not done that. I've frozen the higher rate threshold. That will generate extra resources for Scottish public services. But for those people, as I say, the top 10% of earners, that's about £7.70 a week difference compared to south of the border. But let's put that into context. In Scotland, we have free education, no prescription charges, of course, more investment in the NHS, free personal care and free education. That's a social contract. The things that are funded through taxation to ensure that we have the kind of country we want to live in.
Now, we're talking about people here clearly who are on good incomes, but this is not super rich, and it's also the people, the squeezed middle, as they're sometimes called, who are going to feel the pressure of council tax rises as well. In what way is this going to boost a economy that I think by every measure in Scotland is seen to be underperforming?
Well, we want to invest over £900 million in our public services, and that's what this budget will allow me to do. Of course, that's the NHS, a real priority to the people of Scotland in education, but on business and innovation, there's more around trade and investment as well, and that will stimulate our economy. And a good package on business rates as well, and particularly for small businesses, and I've reduced the poundage, so that's the business tax rate for non-domestic rates, for all businesses across Scotland through reducing the poundage. So there's a good business package, there's more on innovation, there's more on internationalisation to try and improve our exports as well. So I'm doing a lot for the economy and providing stability as well as stimulating growth. But you mentioned council tax, very interesting point, of course, because even with the proposed increases, it's at local authorities' discretion whether they choose to increase it to 3%. Or not, even with the changes to the multipliers, with all of those changes, council tax will still be more affordable in Scotland and south of the border, where the rises have been higher.
Well, you mentioned council tax and whether councils indeed choose to raise it. Why is it all right for councils to raise tax and not for you as a central government?
Well, look, some parties in the Scottish Parliament wanted me to hike the tax rates. I've chosen not to do that. I've taken a balanced approach, focusing, yes, on people's ability to pay. The change that we're proposing around the higher rate threshold will affect 10% of earners, but that essentially is just a cash freeze in the threshold. What I've done is taken a balanced approach to taxation to ensure that we can generate revenues, to invest in our public services, but ensure we've got a balanced approach to our economy.
Derek Mackay, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Well, let's go now to our political editor, Brian Taylor, who's outside Holyrood. Brian, your thoughts on the... Oh, no, there you are. Hello. Your thoughts on the deal that Derek Mackay was able to make?
I think it's intriguing that Holyrood, the Parliament behind me here, has divided along the fault line that pre-exists in Scottish politics. Both the SNP and the Greens, of course, support independence, a topic that's never very far away in Scotland, but is right back up the top of the agenda with the possibility, I stress possibility, of a referendum in the aftermath of the Brexit controversy. But I think also there was an eye on another political dimension, which is the local elections coming along in May. You have now the Labour Party set to attack on what they claim is underfunding, the Tories set to attack on what they claim is over-taxation, and both the Greens and the SNP will now argue that they have been able to divert extra resources to local government. I think the SNP will also be pretty content that they have managed to contain, as you heard Derek Mackay explaining there, managed to contain the extent of the increase in taxation. Now, it isn't an absolute increase, it's an increase by comparison with the money that will be paid in England. But he has managed to contain that because they were already proposing to charge more on higher earners than they were in England. All he's done is top that up a little bit. Just on one little further point, we heard Murdo Fraser attack the Greens as being, what was it, lentil munching and sandal wearing. I'm told that Patrick Harvey isn't particularly fond of lentils. I have no information to give you at this moment on sandals.
Thank you very much, Brian Taylor. Well, the UK government has been giving details of its strategy for leaving the European Union. Its white paper says the UK wants a bold and ambitious free trade agreement with Europe and other countries. But the SNP has criticised the document and says ministers are being disrespectful to Parliament. Here's our Westminster correspondent, David Porter.
Another day and another development in the ongoing Brexit saga. At the moment, it trumps everything else here at Westminster.
The ayes to the right, 100. The noes to the left, 336.
Last night, despite opposition from the SNP, MPs voted overwhelmingly to take the first step towards invoking Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, the start of the process of leaving the European Union.
Secretary of State for exiting the European Union.
Today, more on how the strategy will work, with the publication of the long-called-for white paper. Not everyone is impressed.
Mr. Speaker, this is a mess. It's a bourrich, and it's going to have an impact on each and every one of us, and people deserve better.
But a commitment from ministers to consult.
There will be any number of occurrences in this House when the 50-odd SNP members will have a chance to hold the government to account, to make their views known on policy, to put the interests of Scotland forward.
But the Nationalists want specific guarantees.
Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State makes much of the process and joked that we might be at this for another 2 years. Yet in that time, the unelected and unaccountable House of Lords will have more influence on the implementation of the White Paper and the negotiations and relationships that we must forge for trade agreements than the governments of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. How does that strengthen the Union?
We have regular monthly meetings with the Scottish Government, the Welsh Government, the Northern Irish Executive when they're in play, and we are taking what they say very seriously.
But buried in the small print, one potential point of conflict: fishing, an iconic Scottish industry which by and large very much favours Brexit. How and who regulates the industry in the future could be a bone of contention between London and Edinburgh. David Porter, reporting Scotland, Westminster.
And David Porter joins me now from Westminster. So we've got the government's Brexit proposals, David, with more details still to come. What's the next step?
Sally, I think as far as most MPs are concerned, they want to have a good scrutiny of this document. This is the much talked about Brexit white paper. As you can see, it is in fact grey on the front, but we won't quibble about that. What they will be wanting to do is have a look at this. It runs to 75 pages. To tell the truth, not a huge amount more in it than perhaps we already knew. That compares to a document of more than 650 pages produced on Brexit by the Scottish Government just before Christmas. What we will get next week when MPs return back here to Westminster is some very detailed consideration of the legislation on Brexit. They will get a chance to amend that legislation to try and change it, and that will take place, that will dominate parliamentary proceedings here for the next 3 days at Westminster.
Also today, David, some confusion, to put it mildly, really, about whether the UK government would block a second Scottish independence referendum.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. It follows reports that the Defence Secretary, Sir Michael Fallon, had said that the UK government would not allow the Scottish government to hold a second independence referendum before 2020. Now, when these reports came out, Downing Street did their best to close it down by saying the only independence referendum they were talking about was the one in 2014 in which Scotland voted against independence, and as far as they were concerned, that had settled things for a generation. Coincidentally, Sir Michael Fallon was actually in Scotland today, and he took the opportunity when asked to rubbish these reports.
If Nicola Sturgeon comes to you and says, I am going to have another referendum, would you block it?
Nicola Sturgeon is trying to distract us all from the problem she's having in getting to grips with what she was elected to do, which is to deal with the Scottish economy. Why is unemployment growing here in Scotland and still falling in England? Getting to grips with school standards in Scotland, getting to grips with problems in the Scottish Health Service. All this talk of a referendum, she's trying to divert us from her failure to grip the issues she should be dealing with. She needs to get back to the day job.
It's Michael Fallon there, and I think what this shows is, with all the talk of Brexit and talks of second independence referendums, it shows at the moment that politics north and south of the border is very febrile, to put it mildly. David Porter at Westminster, thank you very much. You're watching BBC Reporting Scotland. It's 16 minutes to 7. A reminder of tonight's top story. An 11th hour deal with the Greens helps the Scottish Government pass its budget. And still to come, Scotland's rugby coach Vern Cotter admits his players are nervous as they prepare for their Six Nations opener. Engineers repairing flood damage, which has left a Perthshire village without gas for 2 days, have encountered significant additional water. About 1,300 properties in Scone have been without supplies since Tuesday night after a gas main was damaged. Scotia Gas had initially believed that the last of the water being pumped out on Thursday morning. They say gas supplies will be restored as soon as possible. A 2-year-old girl has suffered serious facial injuries after being attacked by a dog in Fife. The incident happened at around 5 p.m. on Wednesday afternoon in Leven. The child was taken to hospital in Kirkcaldy, where she's receiving treatment. Police say they're still searching for the dog, described as a black Staffordshire Pit Bull Terrier type, and its owner. The family of Emma Caldwell, who was murdered in 2005, have appealed directly to her killer to give him or herself up to the police. Speaking outside the Crown Office in Edinburgh after a meeting with the Lord Advocate, they expressed confidence in Police Scotland's new investigation of the case.
Today was a robust and painful meeting, but the Caldwell family welcomed the dedication and the commitment shown by Police Scotland and the Lord Advocate's team to securing justice. But such trust is not unconditional. From here on in, the Caldwell family want absolute transparency, accountability, and will not tolerate any further failures or empty promises.
A strategy has been launched to double the amount of life science business in Scotland. The sector, working on medicine and treatments for humans, animals and plants, has seen 24% growth in recent years. The Scottish Government says the targets are ambitious, but the rewards are huge for patients, clinicians and the economy. Maura Kinnerborough has been finding out more.
This liquid is like a light bulb. Injected in a patient, it can show up cancer. If trials work, it will be sold worldwide.
These are multi-million-pound sales revenues. You know, these address a world issue, a medical need. So we will sell these products in the US and Europe and Japan. By tackling disease early, you know, we can help the NHS in Scotland be more effective by actually treating earlier and not having to give expensive drugs in when the disease is more progressed.
As a patient, to know you have one procedure.
One of many methods and medicines made in Scotland for humans, animals, even plants. Combined, these life sciences boast an annual turnover of £4 billion. The industry plans to double this, so why does it still need public money?
These are highly valuable jobs, talented individuals that we're attracting to Scotland, and the wealth that's generated by the life sciences sector helps the entire economy. So a city like Edinburgh or Glasgow, Aberdeen, Dundee, where there's other clusters of activity, are in a large part being driven by this.
They're keen to secure Scotland's world-leading status.
It's about driving innovation from our research and from our company base, and it's about driving internationalisation. So the great ideas and inventions that are created in Scotland is how do we scale them up and how do we translate them across the world.
Inside a body, the solution can spot lung infections. Industry and government insist planning more projects here is good for patients, good for the health service and good for the economy. Maura Kinnerborough, Reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
Let's take a look now at other stories from across the country. Specialist crime investigators are reviewing the details of a man's death in the Highlands 20 years ago. Kevin MacLeod's body was found in Wick Harbour, and while his family suspect he'd been murdered, police said the 24-year-old's death was accidental. Murder squad detectives are now re-examining the case after Mr MacLeod's parents made a personal plea to Police Scotland's Chief Constable. Police in Edinburgh have released CCTV footage after an armed robbery in the city last week. They believe the man in the footage may be able to help with their investigation into the incident in which a 3-figure cash sum was stolen. It happened around 6:25 p.m. on Monday, the 23rd of January, at a shop in Rose Street. Tyree Trust are looking to buy the 3 main harbours on the island. The harbour at Milton is the main port for fishing boats. The second is at Scarinish, which has been declared unsafe, and Gott Bay Harbour is home to the Calmac Ferry Pier.
Well, harbours have always been a big priority for the Tyree Community Trust over the last 10 years, really since its inception, because being a coastal community in a small island, it's very important to have good access to the sea from a fishing, leisure and rec, and also general access point of view. So at this stage, the kind of harbour investigations that have gone on over previous years are now ramping up. We're looking at attempting to get involved in direct support of the fishing fleet and the fishing community here.
Dundee's Rep Theatre has attracted record-breaking audiences. Its first annual report reveals that numbers increased by 17% to more than 76,000 in the last year. The theatre is home to a rep company and the Scottish Dance Theatre, as well as hosting productions by visiting companies. In rugby, Scotland's head coach, Vern Cotter, says he can feel the nervousness in his squad ahead of the opening match of this year's Six Nations. The Scots are at home to Ireland at Murrayfield on Saturday. And as David Curry reports, they're hoping to get off to a better start than in recent campaigns.
Vern Cotter's facial expression is typically difficult to read, but announcing his starting lineup to face Ireland, he was nothing if not candid about the mood in the squad.
I can feel the nervousness within the group. They know it's a big game, and they're ready to roll their sleeves up and have a go at it. Being a little bit nervous means that you're probably sharper and a little bit more on edge, and I think you need to be in the game. You need to be wary of the opposition. If you're going comfortably, you're in a lot of trouble.
First night nerves are understandable. After all, Scotland have a pretty poor record when it comes to Six Nations opening matches, even here at Murrayfield. Indeed, they've only won one. That was against France back in 2006. That was some time before the scorer of this try was playing, and he thinks the slow starters tag may contribute to the nerves.
And there will be a try, and it's Hugh Jones!
That could be part of it. I think also that this game up against Ireland is a massive one for us. We've both sides have come off the back of good sort of autumn tests. And we really want to go into the Six Nations, start with a win. So, I mean, I think it's natural to be nervous going into a competition, especially for a big game like this.
The messages that always come off the back of a disappointing Six Nations are all focused on momentum. If you get out the blocks and start with a win, then you can build on that. If you lose your opener, then it's difficult. You're chasing a win off the back of that. So this year for Scotland, 3 home games. We've got to target the home games for starters.
Lining up out wide for Ireland, O'Brien carries it in himself, stretches and scores!
If Scotland are to get off to a flyer, it's not just nerves they'll need to conquer. They'll need to beat an Irish side who not only beat Scotland by 40 points to 10 on their last visit, but also beat the world champion All Blacks in the autumn. David Curry, reporting Scotland, Murrayfield.
Archaeologists think they've found the royal seat of a lost ancient kingdom in the heart of Galloway. Reged was known to exist in the 6th and 7th centuries, but was always thought to be centred in what's now Cumbria. New research casts doubt on that and suggests that Reged's power base was actually in Scotland. Willie Johnson reports.
Trustees Hill, a known ancient site with a previously uncertain past. Today, markers point the way for walkers, but who first trod these paths?
What drew us to this site were these Pictish carvings here.
On the approach to the summit, mysterious stone carvings, apparently Pictish in nature, but in part of Scotland the Picts didn't come to. What were they? 4 years ago, a search for clues turned up some remarkable and unexpected finds. French earthenware, which foreign merchants are presumed to have come here to trade. And fine decorative metalwork, like this, part of a horse harness, and this, a highly ornate thistlehead pin.
It's been very finely crafted out of iron, and it also has bronze bands around it, the neck of it, which is extremely difficult to manufacture.
These were not the trinkets of peasants, and suggested something very special.
It's now thought the carvings were not Pictish, but made by ancient local Britons of Galloway, and that the stones, combined with a ceremonial well on this side, mark the entrance to a royal stronghold, a royal palace, if you will, the very heart of a lost ancient kingdom. We think this is the royal stronghold of the kingdom of Reged. We think this because
It's all the hallmarks of a royal site of the Dark Ages. It's always been presumed that Reghead lay in Cumbria, but in fact there's no archaeological evidence for this. Reghead was a kingdom that has been lost for centuries, so we're now putting the core of Reghead back on the map in Galloway. It's redrawing the map of Dark Age Britain.
King Urien of Reghead was extolled by the poet Taliesin in the 6th century, but his seat of power was never known. If the archaeologists are right, this could be it, and thereby the source of Scotland's earliest literature. Willie Johnston, reporting Scotland, Trustees Hill, in the Lost Kingdom of Reghead.
Timeline is on BBC Two at 7:30 tonight. Glenn and Shireen have the details.
Anti-Trump protests across the country, but do they make any difference?
As the Scottish child abuse inquiry begins, we speak to one man abused at a top private school.
And the cycling legend, Graham Aubrey, will be with us live.
In the meantime, let's see what we can expect from the weather. Here's Koser.
Thank you, Sally. Good evening to you all. Well, it's been quite cloudy so far today, and we'll continue to see cloud as we head into the evening as well. And it's been very mild as well. Temperatures reached around 13 Celsius for Edinburgh and for Skye today. And it's been quite windy too. This picture sent in from one of our weather watchers, the winds whipping up the waves here in Southend and Argyll and Bute. And for the rest of tonight, it will be mostly cloudy, quite wet and windy as well. Now, as we head through to the rest of this evening, you can see from this pressure chart the area of low pressure moving to the north of us. And look how tight those isobars are. Some very strong winds, especially for the west coast, maybe even touching gale to severe gale force, perhaps along the Solway and across to Tiree and South Uist as well. The gusts of 50 to 60 miles per hour. Further towards the east, any rain will be lighter and patchier. And for the far north and northeast, some clear skies here for a time. And temperatures dipping down to around 6 to 7 Celsius. And those strong winds continue throughout the day tomorrow, especially across the west coast and up towards the northwest as well. But it's an improving story tomorrow. Any rain will become confined mainly to the very far northwest. And throughout the day tomorrow, by the afternoon, a good deal of sunshine around and drier conditions. So if you're heading out around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there will be a good deal of sunshine around for Caithness, for Inverness as well, and along the Murray coast for northern parts of Aberdeenshire. There will be some cloud around as well across the central belt, but bright with some sunny spells. And by the end of the afternoon, we'll start to see some thicker cloud moving in across Dumfries and Galloway and some outbreaks of rain. Now that will mark a change, and as you can see, Friday night into Saturday, an area of low pressure across England and Wales will move northwards across us, bringing with it some outbreaks of rain and some strong winds. But this time, the strongest of those winds will be across the east coast of Scotland, and that rain may be quite wintry up over the hills too. By the time we reach Saturday, then, there will be some outbreaks of rain, some wintriness up over the hills, but improving by the afternoon, some drier, brighter weather, but cooler than it has been of late, 6 or 7 Celsius. And Sunday, apart from the far northeast, a good deal of dry and bright weather. And that's your forecast.
Thanks very much, Koser. Now, a reminder of tonight's main news. MSPs have voted to support the Scottish Government's budget, with the Greens backing the SNP's plans. And that's Reporting Scotland. I'll be back with the headlines at 8 and the late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news. See you then. Bye-bye.